Hi, 7th graders, and welcome to our next week of grammar and writing. It is Monday, September the 21st, and you will be doing lesson 6 with me today out of our green book. Before that, let me just remind you of a few things. Today and Tuesday, you should be working on your poem. On Wednesday, I am going to read it out loud and see how many blanks you can fill in. So be ready for that. So be studying it. You should be a solid 4 lines at this point and be adding probably the 5th and 6th one this week. I will tell you that my 3rd graders, I have a couple of them that have memorized the whole thing that you guys are memorizing, or at least that whole first paragraph. So you might have a little bit of work to do to keep up with them. For your writing this week, let me grab the has so I can remind you what you're doing. For your writing, you want to make sure that you have completed the rough draft of the descriptive. Now let me just remind you briefly what we are doing. We are looking, for those of you that weren't in the class and maybe haven't watched the video from the class, remember I am recording them, so if you're absent, it is something you'll be able to access, not in real time, but later that evening. So what we are doing is we are working on descriptive. So we are working on something that you can look at, that you can touch, that maybe you can smell, and you are going through all of your senses and trying to describe that to me. Now, I promised you an example that I had written about my dog, and I totally forgot to put that up. So I will look for that and see if I can find it, and then I'll get it to you. Because I want you to see how if you use really strong verbs, strong adjectives, that you can really describe something really well and make the person feel like they're right there looking at it. So you're working on that. It says in the has, make sure you have completed the rough draft of the description paragraph. And so make sure that you have gone through, added in your dress-ups. You should try to use all 5 dress-ups and a variety of sentence openers. And if you printed off the checklist from Sycamore, please include that. If not, you will be using the checklist for the next assignment, and I will have copies of that for you. So let's get right to our lesson 6. And this is similar to what we've been talking about with direct objects, indirect objects, the object complements or the objective complements. But this is a little bit different, and there's a different verb that's involved here. So first I want to talk about verbs. And there are 2 kinds of verbs, and I think maybe we've talked about them a little bit in class, but there's the transitive. And I can't remember if I did it in class or if I talked to you on the video about it. But the transitive, and again, I apologize for my little halo lights and all of that. They are reflecting, and so I have to try to figure out how to do that. But anyway, we are talking about transitive verbs. Those are the kinds of verbs that you can close your eyes and you can see the action in your head. So if I said the horse galloped, you would be able to close your eyes and see that action. However, if I said the horse is pretty, you can't necessarily see the word is. And so there's a difference there between a transitive, which is the action in your head, and a linking verb. Now, I want you to write these down. I want you to take notes, and I want you to write down because I want them to be in your notes or on an index card or something so that you can access them for this homework. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, and been. Now, if you have to stop the video for a second so that you can get all of those written down, please do that, because you're going to see these pop up. There are a few other verbs that can show up here as well that are in this linking, but wait till we see them and I'll go over them with you. So the first thing that we need to remember are these linking verbs, and they're going to show up in what we're doing today. So if you will, I want you to look at page 32 of the green text, and we are going to talk about two new things that are going to show up in your sentences. The first one is a predicate nominative, and it is a noun or pronoun that follows a linking verb and renames the subject. So if I said David is king, then is the linking verb, remember? Right there it is. David was the subject, and king is renaming him. It's like another name for him. Mrs. Jernigan is teacher. So Mrs. Jernigan is that linking verb. And then teacher is on the other end. It's renaming. So nominative, think N for noun. A predicate adjective follows a linking verb and modifies the subject. All that means is that it is describing. So Mrs. Jernigan is tired. Tired is modifying. David is strong. Strong is modifying him. The predicate nominatives and adjectives are called subjective complements. So like we had objective complements before, direct object, indirect objects. Now we have subjective complements. That means the subject is being completed by these words. Now, it points out here all of the words that I just showed you right here. If you look down at the middle of page 32, it says forms of be. The am, is, are, was, were, be, being, and been. I mentioned there would be some other words that could sneak in. And verbs of sense, your sensual, that we've already talked about. The smell, taste, that tastes good. Taste, feel, smell, sound, look, appear. You would also want to add those to this list so that you can be looking for those words when you do your homework. And a few other linking verbs are grow, seem, stay, become, remain. This isn't necessarily an exhaustive list. You could see even more than this. Excuse me. So the predicate nominative we've already talked about is the noun, David is king, something renaming. The predicate adjective, and if you look over on page 33, there's more explanation and examples there for the predicate adjective. Here's one that's using one of those taste verbs or one of those sense verbs. If you look about halfway down on page 33, it says the manna from heaven tasted sweet. So there is that sense, the taste, tasted sweet or smelled sweet. And so you have that idea of a few other verbs that can sneak in to be these linking. Now I've mentioned that a predicate nominative must be a noun or a pronoun. So pronoun can also sneak in there as well. We tasted, well, no, that wouldn't work. That would be a direct object. I'm trying to think of examples off the top of my head. So let's see if we come up with some that, as we do the class practice, that might use the pronouns. So I want to talk about how to diagram these. And make sure you have some paper in front of you so that you can do the diagramming. Now, when we talked about, here's direct object. Mom baked a cake. And that direct object straight up and down. Transitive verb. The intransitive does something different. So here's your predicate nominative and predicate adjective. David is king. Subject is in the same place. The verb is in the same place. However, this line goes and gets crooked on us. and it's going to backslash, and it's going to be king, just like that. And so it indicates, for me, I always looked at this as kind of like an arrow, you know, kind of coming back and reminding. So remember the backslash. I will tell you that in tests that I've graded over the years, this is the biggest error that students make. They forget the backslash. They know that it's an adjective or a noun, but they forget to put the backslash in there. So if you look at page 34, we have a couple of examples. David became the king of Israel, and it shows us that backslash. The stars appear unusually bright tonight. Again, the backslash. Now, if you had a compound, which we've seen lots of compounds since we started. So we have a compound here that says Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior. And so we're going to put the is, but then we have a backslash, and here we have to do a double. Just like we've done before with other things. So Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior. So don't forget your pencil point. That can show up in a lot of places. It can show up as a compound verb. It can show up as a compound subject, compound direct object, compound predicate, nominative, and adjective. Now, we've talked about the direct and indirect object. We've also talked about the predicate, nominative, and adjective. And sometimes they seem to answer the same questions. Sometimes they seem to do the same things. They kind of sort of do. It depends on the verb that comes in there between them. And it also, I also like to liken them to cousins, to being cousins. So they are very similar. They're kind of in the same family. And they're doing basically the same jobs. They're coming after the verb, but it just depends on what kind of verb you have. So that's the thing to be mindful of. Now I want to do a few of the class practice just like we would do in class. And so I'm going to give you a few minutes. I would like for you in A of class practice on page 35. I want you to, you're going to pause in just a second, and you're going to do A and B because you're going to look for nominatives and then adjectives. And I want you to write them down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. And I want you to pause and I want you to answer those. And then when you have done that, come back on and we will go over them. So pause and take a moment to answer those questions, and then I will give you the answers and you will know whether you're on the right track or not. Now please note this, you will not be handing this in. I know some of you handed in class practice last week. All I would like for you to do is on the honor system, do it, and you can do it on scrap paper, you can do it on a whiteboard, but do the class practice because it really does help. So pause and then come back in a few minutes and we will go over the answers. Okay, so if you are back, I'm assuming that you did all of A and all of B, and I want to go over the answers with you. So number 1, Jesus has become the Savior of the world. So we know that Jesus is the subject, has become is the verb. Now, that has become doesn't, well, I don't have my list up here anymore, doesn't show up in those lists of verbs. But even the words has, have, had, those are all the linking verbs, okay? So you can add those to your lists as well. So Jesus has become, and it seems like it answers that what question that direct objects do. So that's why I said earlier they're cousins. They do kind of answer the same questions. But in this case, we have the linking verb, so we know that it has to be the predicate nominative. So what comes on the other side of the verb? Savior. Of the world is a prepositional phrase, and we're going to talk more about those so that you guys know how to get rid of them when we're looking for the important parts of a sentence. So Savior, and it's a noun. A man of sorrows was he. Now man was and then he. So he is a pronoun, so that's how those pronouns can sneak in that I told you about a little bit ago. He has always been a faithful friend to the penitent. He is the subject, has been, don't include always, that's an adverb. He has been what? He has been that friend. That's a noun. So friend is the predicate nominative, it's a noun. Judas had been Jesus's disciple. Judas is the subject, had been is the verb, and disciple is the noun. He became a thief and a traitor. He is the subject, became is the verb, and then we have two. Thief and traitor, both nouns. Now, look at the next one in B. We have name the predicate adjectives in these sentences. You must be creative and diligent to write good poems. You is the subject, must be is the verb. Creative and diligent are our adjectives. Uncle Clarence is feeble with age. Uncle Clarence is the subject, is the verb, feeble is describing him. These biscuits taste delicious. Biscuits taste, and how do they taste? They taste delicious. That is an adjective describing the biscuits. The hay in the mow was old and musty. Hay was old and musty, so old and musty are your adjectives. Our dog seems afraid of thunderstorms. Dog, seems is the verb, and afraid is the adjective describing the dog. So there you've had a chance to do some for practice. Now tomorrow, for your homework, you're doing page 35 and 36. Written exercises A and B all. That will be turned in on Wednesday with the homework that you did last Thursday. So make sure again that, remember, you need to have a couple of folders. I get your folders back to you in the family mail the next week, but we'll have to have a couple where we're trading them in and out. So make sure you're getting everything in those folders to turn in on Wednesday. Now, just one note. I am really looking in your writing. I'm looking for a few things. I'm looking for you to use the keyword outline, and I'm using you to have a nice written paper, and I'm looking for it to be in a folder. So don't hand me individual papers. All your grammar and your writing needs to go in that folder that you turn in on Wednesday. So I think that's it for this week. You should have enough to do your homework, to finish up your paper, and I will plan to see you in class on Wednesday, and at that time we will start to talk about the abstract paper. So I will see you then. Have a good Tuesday.